Hello everybody. We've had so much terrible rain here in Devon that it's not been very conducive for painting outdoors. Um, Today's video is not about painting outdoors either, although I am painting a landscape. I recently travelled to an artist friend's studio on Dartmoor, and on the way up a friend was driving and I was taking photographs of the rainy conditions and beautiful Dartmoor landscape. Quite a lot of the shots ended up being wet roads with misty trees. It was quite atmospheric, I think, and I thought I'd make a small video of an attempt at a watercolour that I did in Wet in Wet. I've often joked that you only need grey and green as colours to be a landscape painter in Britain, and this painting seems to illustrate that quite well. But there's some quite interesting techniques. It's quite a simple painting. I just hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, let's get on with it. So here's the reference photograph, Dartmoor Road, looking through a wet windshield. You can see the misty trees, and I'm starting on stretched watercolour paper and going over with a very light grey wash to establish the first wetness on the page, and start to work into that. I'm using a large soft bristled brush and just painting gently around, just trying to establish the first washes and start to hint at where some of the darker tones are, and in goes the first bleed and wet, and I can just wipe that away where it's bled too far, and just work out from that, building all the time upon the image and developing it as we go, referring to the reference shot and gradually building up tones. The whole process takes 2 or 3 hours in total, and obviously the video is quite edited. And here I'm putting in a sort of bleed of turquoise, which will establish some of the distant trees, and then going in again, Wet in Wet, with the closer bank of trees that were on the right hand side of the road. I just love the way that the misty atmosphere helped to establish distance, and that was evident in quite a lot of the photographs I took that day. And it's just great fun having a go in Wet in Wet, because it's quite a risky technique. There's a lot of things can go wrong, especially in the first stages, but it's very satisfying to let the paint move around and expand and dissipate and dissolve in all the beautiful ways that watercolour allows. And the more you do it, the more you get a feel for this. And wet Dartmoor roads lend themselves to that kind of atmosphere. So that's why I'm having a go at this now. It's good in the first stages of watercolour to make some quite bold, decisive marks as well. These will be the mainstay of the painting and the composition, and help you to establish some of the main large shapes. The good thing about using a brush like this is that you can make large marks. You do washes, you can also shape the tip and do quite fine marks and draw quite finely. That's nice. It's a really convenient thing to be able to do that with a single brush. Whilst I'm being fairly free with this painting, I'm taking some care to leave some of the whites, so I'm drawing in between them with this fine point of the brush, because they'll be really the centre of the focus later on. So it's important to make sure you don't wash over those. It's also important to let the paper dry to just the right stage so you can do that drawing in, because if you'd left it wet then they're just going to bleed together. So taking care to let different areas of the paper dry, so you can work in slightly different ways and apply paint in different ways, is an important aspect of this technique. One of the things you find with wet in wet is that as it dries, the paint fades quite considerably from the tone that appeared when you put it down, and so you have to go back in and repaint certain areas or darken them or emphasize them. You also have to re-wet certain areas to keep the paint alive and stop hard edges from developing. So there's a lot of controlling, there's a lot of fiddling around and revisiting, going back in, repainting various areas, 2 or 3 approaches to a particular area to get it the tone and build up of form that you might want. So all that's involved. I quite like this stage of the painting where it's quite abstract and some of the tones are starting to strengthen up. Quite satisfying. Some stages of paintings, it's nice to review when you're making a video and see what some of the stages you would otherwise forget looked like.
Classic FM. Movement of the Punchinella suite, and during our series Perfect Pit, they've been necessities right now. Movement of Albinonis over Concerto, 49-18-12. It's said that almost a third of Christmas presents don't get played with after Christmas Day. So this year, give them something that will last. Premium bonds from Enter a Chance every month to win cash prizes. And now, premium bonds can be bought for any child from just £25. Buy before November the 25th to receive in time for Christmas shower for what seems like an eternity. Luckily, with high value, it comes together, and everything. You think you do it for the money, the game, the adrenaline rush. What if it is? Prepare to weep. All the shop singers from mortgage and a credit card for over a year. Make empty promises or create unrealistic expectations when it comes to the NHS. 2 leading health groups have raced. Here's the party's leader in Westminster, Liz Saville-Roberts. The 2 big issues for our day are living into the future. Labour campaign group Momentum is urging activists to take weeks off work to volunteer for the party to reveal its 600 candidates. Elsewhere, 2,500 jobs are at risk at another care. Have made ending paramilitarism not perfect roast. Only Bisto best gravy will do. Made with real meat juices. The better remaining mostly cloudy for Northern Ireland, with a few showers developing and turning east of England.
Cloudy for the Midlands with some bright spells, a high of 12 degrees. From Global News. Handel, part of the music for the Royal Fireworks. There they are in the season. The English Baroque soloists conducted by John Elliott Gardner. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. My Saturday,
as usual. Thanks very much, Anne-Marie.
So here comes a bit of blotting paper that I've roughly torn to obscure the sky and mask it from a little bit of splattering. Just a light splattering of dark to suggest a few leaves and create a bit of atmosphere. And then I'm going to go in with something slightly lighter as well. And a little bit of stippling with a stiff bristled brush as well. Just varying techniques. And now there's a bit of white body colour, just to pick out some of the light coming through the trees, which won't be quite this bright when it dries, but it just gives a few highlights where I wasn't able to meet them, to leave them. These little white speckles also recall the light caught in the raindrops on the windscreen, and in the photograph they created a kind of texture that I was interested in, so putting in these highlights with the white harkens to that and suggests it.
go to our website, it's classicfm.com for your chance to win.